into your house.
It's got a few more problems with mine being shaken up a little bit, I think.
So, just so you both know, we're actually live right now. I've managed to get the stream working. So, hello everybody. I'm Orpheus and welcome to Arcadia. Clearly, I'm joined by two guests tonight. We've got Red Panda. Give them a wave.
Hi. And
we've got Chugs.
Hello.
So tonight we're going to be talking about Wind and Truth, and actually just a little bit more about Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archive that we're all massive fans on. As you can see, we've all got delightful backgrounds. My green screen. Harry's actually got a guitar in his background rather than just a plain wall. So
I still kind of need to spruce the place up a little bit still.
Do you think so? I mean, it's quite minimalist, isn't it?
I think for the creds, you'd have like some sort of fantasy artwork here, sort of thing, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
But
I was thinking we've got a map of Roshar that is framed that I really should have put in the background, but I didn't.
Yeah.
So yeah, Red Panda actually got me that for was it birthday present?
Yes.
Nice. Okay. Right. So our Streamlabs stuff is working. You're gonna have to excuse us for a minute while we sort this out. But I think that all of the sound seems pretty good actually.
From what I can see on Twitch as well, it looks like it's all actually vaguely working. So this is that's one step beyond I thought we would get, to be honest.
My first ever working. Oh, I tell you what, Harry needs to go down here. There you go. You're now framed correctly with leaves either side of you.
Oh, beautiful.
So I'll just tonight what we're going to be doing, and I talked to the guys about this a little bit earlier. I'll just sort of tell everyone sort of what we're going to be up to, what we're going to be talking about. So we're going to do a little bit of a summary of the history of the Stormlight Archive, like a plot summary almost. It shouldn't take me more than 5 minutes to read, but I can appreciate that you guys probably have quite a lot of catching up to do, as do we. All of us have been refreshing ourselves on all of the different main plot lines and subplots that Brandon Sanderson puts into his book, but I'm going to try and summarize them in about 5 minutes, and that's 4 huge tomes, isn't it, before you even reach Wind and Truth? What do you have? Way of Kings, Words of Radiance, Oathbreaker, and then Rhythm of War, right?
Well, it depends if you want to get into the Cosmere aware stuff, as you call it, with all of his other books that feed into it as well. So you can go and go if you wanted to.
Is that the stuff that the stuff that's like side stories with Lift and things like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of the stuff that you see in the side characters are either from other books or they're referenced, or it's magic systems from some of the other series, that kind of thing, which is one of the reasons it's so cool. But it's also one of the reasons it's so daunting to get into, because there's so much to it, right?
I mean, some people watching this might be absolute beginners to Brandon Sanderson, in which case I would say, start at the beginning. We're obviously
see you in 5 years.
See you in 5 years. You might think there's some spoilers coming, but by the time you've actually got round to reading through the books, you probably will have forgotten them all. So, carry on watching. I'm going to introduce that story. We're going to chat a little bit about our Night Radiant callings, because each one of us, being the absolute nerds that we are, have gone and we've done the official Brandon Sanderson Knights Radiant quiz. It's a bit like, with Potterworld, you get your Patronus, don't you? You do that sort of quiz. But I actually thought this one was more, a little bit more professional, as it asks you a little bit more sort of psychometric questioning. I mean, Red Panda's a psychologist, so she'd probably be able to explain whether or not it was any good.
It's better than some of the outcome measures we use in the NHS, so it's fine.
So, yeah, and then we're going to chat about our favourite characters, why we love them, and also sort of, and then get into the thick of it, which is really going to be theories and predictions, or kind of what we want to see from Wind and Truth, what sort of aspects or subplots or some of the main plots that how he's going to tie those together. Because actually, I think Wind and Truth is going to be the last one of this particular arc of the Stormlight Archive, isn't it? So the story of, you know, Kaladin, of Dalinar, all of those great characters, you know, is probably going to conclude, or at least like the focus on them is then going to shift onto new books. But I think this is his main set of books. All of them sort of tie into the Cosmere in general, right? But like these ones are like the main story arc, the one that's going to sort of achieve his great epic opus. Was it Opus Magnus? I can't remember. So then we're going to talk a little bit about like different bits of art that we like about the books as well. We're going to go on DeviantArt, which, you know, I first went on like in my emo teens, I think, which has somehow managed to survive through like fan art creation. And have a look at some of that stuff. We'll talk about the world of Roshar, its creatures and mysteries. And then we're going to finish off with a little bit of like, who do you think is the most OP character in Brandon Sanderson's stories? Because although his magic systems are super intricate, some characters are definitely extremely powerful compared to some others. And there's definitely some bad Surge Binders. Maybe bad is the wrong word, but like less powerful Surge Binders than others.
Like you'd be upset if you were in the queue and you got handed out something. You know, you turned up after the Windrunners or whatever, you'd be disappointed, wouldn't you? Yeah,
exactly. It would be tragic. But anyway, we can bring some of that stuff out in a second. I've put a little bit of background music on. Please drop stuff into the chat if any of the audio or the video goes funky. But mostly for the chat, please jump in and put what you like about the books. You know, comment on what we're talking about, and you know, we'll pick up discussion points from there, and also tell us what you're excited about, or if you finish the book, no spoilers. Okay, I mean, I don't know how you would have finished a tome which is bigger than a hand, I think, in like a week or something it's been since it was released, but if you have, you're a legend.
But please don't spoil it, because I'll be really sad.
Yeah, definitely don't. Moderator will ban. You'll get immediate ban. The hardest ban ever. Okay, cool. Right, without further ado, I'm going to jump in and I'm going to do the summary. So you guys will have to listen along for a while, but feel free to jump in and give your own opinions as I'm doing it as well. Right, okay, cool. So, the Stormlight Archive is an epic saga set in the storm-racked world of Roshar, a place where ancient powers awaken and the fate of nations hangs in the balance. It begins with the Way of Kings, where Kaladin, a once respected soldier, is betrayed and enslaved. While working as a bridgeman, a near-suicidal role on the battlefield, on the Shattered Plains, he discovers a bond with Sylfrena, or Syl, as he refers to her, and she refers to herself, an honor spren, granting him the ability to harness the power of Stormlight. Meanwhile, Dalinar Kholin, a High Prince of Alethkar, experiences visions during high storms. These visions urge him to unite the human nations against a looming desolation. Shallan Devar, a young noblewoman, sets out to steal a magical fabrial from the renowned scholar Jasnah Kholin to save her impoverished family, but instead becomes her apprentice, learning about the legendary Knights Radiant and the ancient secrets of Roshar. In Words of Radiance, Kaladin embraces his destiny as a Windrunner, uses his powers to protect Dalinar from assassination by the scheming Parshendi and internal political threats. Shallan journeys to the Shattered Plains to uncover the Oathgate, an ancient portal system, and in the process unlocks her abilities as a Lightweaver, capable of creating illusions with her bond to a cryptic spren named Pattern. The Parshendi, driven by desperation, summon a high storm combined with the Everstorm, a cataclysmic event that brings Voidbringers, ancient enemies of humanity, back into the world. Next, Oathbringer focuses on Dalinar's journey of redemption as he confronts the horrors of his past, including the revelation that he ruthlessly burned the city of Rathalas, killing thousands, including his own wife, Evie. Meanwhile, Kaladin struggles to reconcile his role as a protector with the human cost of war, and Shalon battles her fractured psyche as she juggles multiple identities. Dalinar takes on the mantle of bondsmith, rallying the nations of Roshar to form a coalition against Odium, the god of hatred. The book climaxes with Dalinar resisting Odium's influence during the Battle of Thalenfield by uniting his forces and declaring, "I will unite instead of divide. I will bring men together." In Rhythm of War, the focus shifts to Navani Kholin, Dalinar's wife, who becomes a key figure in the war effort by studying fabrials and creating advanced technology, such as anti-void-like weapons. Kaladin faces his deepest struggles with depression and is forced to step back from leadership, while his bond with Syl deepens. Venli, a listener who betrayed her people to serve Odium, reveals the inner workings of the Singers and the true nature of void binding. Taravangian, after a series of cunning manipulations, kills Reyes, the former Odium, and takes on the mantle of the Shard himself, becoming the new Odium with his own terrifying plans for Roshar. And that's really where we're up to in the story. I mean, you know, I've massively missed out huge amounts in that, and there are so many different types of creature and hero. But I think that does as a little bit of a summary to get us started. So first of all, I just wanted to, talk to Red Panda and Chugs about their Night Radiant callings and what a Night Radiant means to them, and like if it inspired you guys at all. Either in sort of, in a philosophical way, or, just like you just found it exciting. But yeah, whatever you want to say about the Knights Radiant. But who wants to go first, Red Panda or Chugs? I mean, I could go first, I guess, but I won't.
Chugs can go first.
Okay, great. Yeah, sure. So I think so. When I did it, I was the Else Caller, so the Else Caller order, which is the same as Yasna, and it's basically the one for like the selfish people by the sound of things. It's when he was talking about like what are the kind of the ideals they aspire to and things like that. It's basically all about the self, and odes are not built around like honor and external factors. They're built around like self-improvement and betterment and that kind of thing. And I also really like the fact that pretty much the only kind of like thing that they don't like is flamboyance. It's like it's pretty open order as long as you're not flamboyant. So I guess it's just full of miserable people.
Do you know what, Chugs? When we came to talking about a psychological assessment during this quiz, how much do you think that actually relates to you as a person?
It's as easy as that. Unfortunately, I don't have the same powers, which are to like soul cast stuff, so change things from one substance to another, which I think is one of those things, is kind of major plot point in the first couple of books with Yasna, or the ability, as far as I know, to open gates into other realms. But it would be nice. It's the logistics that gets you in these things, Paddy. Orpheus. As you know, it's so important, right? And I think that's what the Else Call is all about. So yeah. It's not the most fashionable job out there, but it might be the best.
I think, certainly Yasna is like one of the most interesting characters. She's like a real change maker in the story of Roshar. And when she starts out, we've got the map here. Where's Alethkar? I think they're actually in Kharbranth, aren't they? When Shalon Devar comes and actually meets her, and there's like a great library there. Taravangian's still a goodie. He's ruling, Kharbranth, and it's sort of like a free city of like knowledge and academia, isn't it? And I think that one of the most interesting things about Yasna and her particular form of surge binding is that it makes her a kingmaker almost. A little bit of, if she applies her power where she wants it to be, that person, then, they get a real edge compared to other people. Because I reckon that that form of surge bind. What did you say again with the which Night Radiant order was it?
Else Callers.
They're definitely one of the maybe greyest in terms of morality, but like one of the bigger move and shakers.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. I think it's better than some. Like we were saying earlier, there's that kind of power ranking. It's not the most exciting, but definitely, can have an impact with. And I think it's just interesting, for me around how the oaths and everything will work. Some of them are more high-minded than others.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's actually like intrinsic to where that power comes from, which I suspect is probably going to end up being a plot point, right? Because it's like, humans and all these gods have kind of interfered in this world. It wasn't initially where they were, and there's all this kind of stuff in the background happening. So it's not all quite as noble as presented. And I think the Elves Call, sort of side of things, a bit more reflective of that, as opposed to, I will protect those who can't protect themselves, all that kind of stuff on the Windrunner side, for example.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because we call them gods, right? But Brandon Sanderson refers to them as like shards, right? They're like
shards of Andalesium, I want to say, something along those lines.
And it kind of gives you the impression that this is something that's been broken up into multiple things, right? Like the different aspects of maybe what something that was before. So in a kind of prediction for the future, in my mind, a shard suggests that something has been broken and things have been scattered across these worlds, and they sort of form the nature of that world, like the driving factors of that world, wherever they've landed, wherever they've ended up. A little bit like the Primarchs, I guess, like in 40k or something like that.
Well, then, funnily enough, it's a complete tangent, but you're talking about the lining up for the powers for the Surge Binders and things like that. Imagine being one of the Primarchs who got one of the lame powers. I've always felt bad for those guys.
Yeah, I know. Or like a really bad Space Marine chapter. Anyway, we digress. But I think it's super cool. In the bottom left-hand corner of the stream right now, we've got the first ideal, and that is something that all Knights Radiant must swear. It's common to all of them. And it's the first step on their journey. It's their like, what do they call it? Epiphany, revelation moment, isn't it? Life before death, strength before weakness, journey before destination. I mean, Harry, have you, as well as your Elsecaller sort of ideals, do you think any of that sort of resonates with you in life, or
Well, I think that the whole purpose of that, like initial baseline for them, is something that everyone can kind of agree to. It's pretty universal, right? In terms of it's make the most out of what you've got, I guess, is what that's saying to you. So yeah, absolutely. It's then just, or beyond that, I think the sort of second and exactly it is getting deep, isn't it? Second and third tier kind of oaths and things. Those are the ones that get more granular and more specific to those orders. And some of those I think end up in drastically different places to some of the others, which I think is a bit more interesting. Like, everyone can kind of, I think it'd be difficult to disagree with those kind of statements as something to. Yeah,
they really do. And I think my order, which I'm not going to reveal yet, obviously, but actually a lot of the Knight Radiant orders clash against each other, and they've got to have this binding factor, right, that enables them to get along, in some way, because they're not. They approach things from different aspects, and one order won't necessarily think the other way is like moral or ethical at all, so.
But I think
universal.
Sorry, that's okay. I was just going to say, I think that's why it's important that it's the first ideal, because it's the first. In order to join the order, everybody has to agree on that, so it's like the underlying principle of everything.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also for, again, talking about that universal side of things. It's not. It's humans, singers. It's for everybody as well, right? It's quite inclusive, which is it's always nice.
Yeah, for sure. Right. Well, Red Panda, let's hear your story, your Knight Radiant oaths.
So I am a Windrunner, which
Shock.
I would argue are the best ones. If you're going to go along and pick one, it probably would be Windrunner, or at least it would be for me. But I guess I think they're the most well known because obviously Kaladin is a Windrunner, so you do a lot of exploration of him and his journey and what I think they're focused on in a lot more detail, especially in the earlier books. But I guess their philosophy is around protection, defending people that can't defend themselves, defending the innocents. It's very, they bond honor spren, so it's very honor based. And I think the ideals, so obviously the overarching one, but then it's around protecting those who can't protect themselves. I'll protect even those I hate, so long as it's right. I'll accept there'll be those that I cannot protect, and I'll protect myself so that I can continue to protect others. And I think as ideals, those are ones that resonate quite a lot with me, with my profession as a psychologist. I think there's a lot around looking after other people, helping other people look after themselves. Maybe arguably less of looking after myself so that I can look after other people. I'm not very good at that one. But I definitely resonate with a lot of the ideals. So it did feel like a very good fit for me.
But that is really interesting because, one of the main points, in our little summary that we just covered there, in Rhythm of War, which is definitely a more introspective book than when, Kaladin, I mean, all of them are introspective, but it's definitely more philosophical than the other ones. When Kaladin starts out on the Shattered Plains, he's a warrior, he's a healer, he's a medic, he's a combat medic essentially. Like that's his role, right? And when he comes away from war, having fought all of that stuff, having been through slavery, he then struggles a lot with PTSD, it's like severe PTSD. And his journey towards his realization that he's got to look after himself and that he can't save everyone, it is basically his whole arc in that story. And it's terrible for him. It really cuts him deep inside that he can't save everyone.
Yeah, but I think it's explored in a really, really beautiful way, because actually I think that without that ideal, you just have like warrior doing warrior things, like all of that sort of, which is very, I think can be quite cliche sometimes, or is maybe overdone. You've just got these people that are strong and can do all of these things and have no difficulties. But I love that the last ideal is around that and brings in a big discussion around mental health and the way that that you see his journey in Rhythm of War of really struggling to accept that in order to look after other people, he has to look after himself, and the kind of conflict that causes inside of him is a really, really interesting part. And I think that Brandon Sanderson does a really good job of bringing in, and this is from a psychologist lens, but lots of different areas of mental health in different ways and presenting them in a world that you wouldn't necessarily come up with themes of depression and PTSD and split personalities and all of those sorts of things, which I really love.
And his family is super disappointed in him, right? For leading this warrior life. And, he questions everything, right? Because his father's disappointment in him, basically, for not being pacifist, for not really sort of ascribing to like almost the Hippocratic oath, the do no harm element of being like a medic, is something that a lot of kind of military medics and things like that do have to like deal with in the real world. And I thought that Brandon Sanderson like just brought that out so well in this book, and the dichotomy between, right, I'm a fighter, I'm a soldier, but at the same time I'm a healer and a gentle person. Like the what do they call it, cognitive dissonance that causes just absolutely almost like shatters his mind, right?
And I think it's also really nice that you see a book that's got a lot of like combat and fighting and things like that isn't just presented as being positive, as in it's not just he's a warrior so therefore he's the best person in the whole world. There's an element of there's also another side to that, there's another way to think about that, and he has to battle with that, which I think is really interesting.
I mean, it's one of those interesting things that it's kind of throughout the whole series, Kaladin is your kind of main contact point with it, right? You kind of like grow organically with understanding what radiants are and how it all works along with him, and the books are kind of mirroring that journey through the oaths and everything. But there is still that underlying fact that he has just got pure main character energy. It is lionizing violence a lot of the time. He is doing a lot of like cool stuff with spears and throwing things around and he's got these cool magic powers and stuff. So it's a bit of whiplash, I think, when you sort of get towards those later books. It does kind of change how it's approached. It's definitely got a bit of a different tone. I'm sure it was kind of always the plan to do that, but they definitely got the hooks in early with a more, this is the cool stuff that you want to see. And then you have that traditional arc, and then we're now back to a less traditional arc where he's building himself back up again. Because of that sort of mental health sort of side of things, as opposed to external forces, shall we say, which are literally enslaving him or whatever.
But it's lovely because you've already, like, you're right, you've already got the hooks, you're already bought into the character, and therefore he can be pulled in a completely different direction that you wouldn't necessarily want to engage with if it was presented at the start, but you're so invested at that point that I think, it is quite jarring, and it was a very different arc for the last book, but I loved that. And I think it pulled people that maybe wouldn't have engaged with that in a direction that they wouldn't have necessarily gone to start off with, which I enjoy. So
I think it's been a pretty common theme across pretty much all the characters as well. You've got Dalinar with all of his demons. You've got Shallan with all of hers, which manifesting in a totally different way.
Borderline personality. So, actual personality,
really
split personality.
So you have all of that kind of stuff going on as well, and I think they've all got that same kind of evolution over the story, and I think that's another part of what this series is trying to say, is that's that personal journey that he'll go in internally is feeding into the overall narrative and where the source of their strength is coming from.
And all of that is unclear. I mean, I think that it's really cool that you can see reflections of real people. Obviously, they're enhanced like massively because it's a fantasy world, but you can definitely draw those parallels. I'll just do my one. So I'm a will shaper, which is probably one of the more chaotic types of Knight Radiant. They don't actually have a great reputation with the Knights Radiant. They are very free-spirited. In fact, they will choose sort of liberty, basically, and above other things, even to the point of, destruction as well. An adventure and exploration is huge in it. So that they really want to see what happens. They're insanely curious, and they also have this huge compassion for oppressed people as well, and they want to sort of break the bonds. And they'll do of slavery or oppression or too many rules or whatever it might be. They want to break out of that thing, and they want to give people this freedom. But that really clashes up against, I think, some of the Radiant ideals. And like one of the Knights Radiant, who's most recent, is a will shaper, and that's Venli. And obviously she did something really bad, which was basically to gain the knowledge and convince the Parshendi to do this ritual, to open themselves up to the Voidbringers, to inhabit this spirit which once upon a time made them powerful, but really is a force of odium, right? A force of odium, so a very destructive thing, and is associated with the Everstorm. And so she almost like individually brings this cataclysm around, or she's the catalyst for the cataclysm, as it were. But what I do find interesting about will shapers, they've got this ability to do transportation, so that's their primary surge. They can move around, and that facilitates their exploration. They can go to Shadesmar, but they can also move around the physical realm in ways other people can't. And they've got cohesion, so they can manipulate the shape of the world. They can actually create and build things according to what they think is right, or their design, their creativity. So they are really creative. But yeah, and they're bonded with these spren, type of light spren called Reachers, which again aren't really that well looked on in Shadesmar, because there's that whole Shadesmar spren society going on underneath all of this. So yeah, I do find them, I wasn't surprised that I got it, because I like to build things in a creative way. I mean, even, this channel is kind of part of that like drive for me, and like all of my life I've wanted to explore, wanted to go on to the next thing. I'm constantly curious, but I do get obsessed, and Red Panda and actually Chugs can test.
We can all attest to that.
Yeah, like if I've got something that I hook onto, even if it causes me harm or others around, like potentially if it gets bad enough, I can just go through with it because I want to see what happens on the other side, And this is definitely something that I've, has one really helped me in my life, but also I've struggled with as well. I don't know if you guys, I mean, they're really recent, this Will Shaper's order to the books, but I don't know if you guys had any thoughts on them.
I think they're a really good example, as we were speaking about earlier, where the some of the like orders clash. So Will Shapers and their love of not following rules or finding rules oppressive, all those sorts of things, bending the rules, versus Skybreakers, who are very rules led, very
doctrine.
Yeah,
like the commissars of the Roshar world.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it will be interesting. There's not been a huge amount of clashing around the orders, but if there's a more kind of surge, for want of a better word, in the orders as they were in the like olden times, it will be really interesting to see how the orders interact with each other, because there could be some disagreements.
Yeah, so I think there already is a bit of conflict around that, which I'm sure will get sort of put into more detail in sort of upcoming books. But as well with the Will Shaper side of things, I think that was that whole thing is like liberation and freedom, and as we know from the real world, cultures that espouse that's not always amazing. It comes with its own set of downsides in addition as well, right? So they're totally against that kind of rigid structure. But they're probably more pragmatic in terms of how they see actions versus somebody like a Windrunner or a Skybreaker or whatever, right?
Yeah, they're for sure, and they're like very, in the moment, and I think that but also there are rational actions for what Venli does. The Parshendi or the Parshmen, right? Who are the slave enslaved Parshendi? They are living basically as almost automatons, because their spirit or their soul has been kind of ripped away from them, but they're very good workers, they're very strong, all of that sort of stuff, but they are just living basically completely oppressed by humanity in Roshar, and it is wrong that they do that, especially as we learn during the last few books that humanity came here from another place. And originally, the Parshendi, or the listeners, as they call them, were the original inhabitants. So, it causes that friction. But anyway,
I think that's one of the best parts of the kind of the way the world is developed. It's kind of, I was going to say humanizing. I guess that's not really the right word, but it's making you sort of understand the Parshendi perspective and all of that kind of stuff, and that really develops in a really good way, because it starts off just being like generic villains which you don't really understand, and then you obviously build that understanding over time, and then it becomes more and more blurred, and I'm sure it's only going to become more blurred in the future.
I've absolutely no doubt, and I mean right now the Parshmen have now realized their spirit, regained their spirit, and because they've been so badly treated, like all hell is coming to the people of Roshar who have enslaved them. But anyway, let's move on. We've discussed some of the main characters already, but I just kind of wanted to, ask you guys, and we'll start off with Red Panda this time, because we started with Chugs last time. But what are some of your favorite characters, or your favorite character, and like what about them like interests you, connects with you, and also what do you want to see for them in Wind and Truth, I guess?
Okay, so this is an interesting one, because the last part of that question cannot be answered, because they actually are no longer alive, which is very frustrating. So, and I don't know if this is a bit of a niche one, but it's Teft.
Is it Taff? Oh,
wow,
Yeah.
and he's like the loyal backbone of the Bridgemen, right?
Yeah, so he, Kaladin and him meet when they're in Bridge 4, but he essentially acts as Kaladin's like second in command, kind of sergeant sort of role. And he's not I think, interestingly, when I was thinking about who my favorite characters are, when you think about the main characters, at some point they've all been my favorite characters, but then I've been like, ugh, now their arc's gone here and I don't like them anymore. And there hasn't been, I think, and that's the point of some of the main characters, in that you're meant to go on that journey with them, and they make morally questionable decisions, and that forces you to reflect on them. Whereas for me, I think some of the supporting characters, such as Teft, and I think a lot of the Bridge 4 characters are all incredible, but for me, he starts off as very much we know that he's addicted to, he's got addiction problems, and I think he goes from being quite a questionable character, and he just goes in an upwards trajectory as he's given all of these opportunities alongside Kaladin. And I think I really enjoy that you're taken on a journey of like his shame, his guilt, his feelings of inadequacy at not being enough, and then he bonds with his spren, and he still kind of harbors all this guilt that he's not enough for her, that she shouldn't have bonded with him. And I love that journey that you're taking on, and I'm pretty sure I cried when he was killed.
Yeah.
Because I could see it coming, and it sort of needed to happen because something big needed to happen in that I guess story arc with Moash and the direction he went in. But I also think that people don't remember that the only reason that Kaladin could continue to be a main character is because when he was sent to the punishment where he was like tied to out in one of the high storms, and the only reason that he survived that is because Teft gave him a dun sphere, because he thought that he was a radiant, and that's the only reason that he survived. And then again, when Kaladin was brought in and was recovering from his wounds, he gave him diamond spheres, and that's how he recovered. So the only reason that we've got Kaladin being all warrior-y is because of Teft and his selflessness.
I wonder if Brandon Sanderson knew soldiers, because he just massively reminds me of like a really long in the tooth old sergeant that was once a really good soldier, and he's sort of fallen, away from that, and sort of become disillusioned, and he has these addiction problems. But then Kaladin, seeing this sort of young, sproggy, very like forthright individual who still has loads of problems, he takes on that sort of mothering role for this young officer or whatever that he's got, and that's he finds his calling. And as soon as then they leave the field of battle, and Kaladin's moved on from his mentorship and his sort of care and supervision and all of that, he then loses his purpose again, and then just descends back into what he was before. And I just it resonates with me massively, being ex-forces, just to see people like that, because you just saw old sergeants like that all of the time. And it's crazy. I don't know what you thought, Chugs.
Yeah, I think he's the surrogate father for Kaladin, isn't he? He's the father that is like the father he wants, as opposed to his actual father. And he's supportive in all those different ways. He's not disappointed in him and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's why it's such a blow for him when he was killed, and that's why Moash did it in that way and everything. But I think they and probably not Teft himself, but the sort of the supporting cast of the Stormlight Archive is really, really strong, and there's a lot of good characters there who might not necessarily have a leading role, but are really fulfilling a niche really well, and they're definitely giving something for the main characters to kind of bounce off. I think in terms of like interesting characters, I wouldn't necessarily my favorite characters, but I'm interested to see where Taravangian goes next. I think that's going to be a real interesting arc in terms of how he treats the powers differently and how that affects him. Because obviously his kind of core motivation is saving his people. That's kind of what's driven him to all of these extremely Machiavellian, dodgy things that he's done at this stage. And then how that manifests itself at the kind of the deity level is probably going to be quite a scary.
Yeah.
Thing to see. So I think that'll be definitely something to watch.
Yeah, because he starts out as this sort of doddering man that you meet in Caer Bronth, right?
And you just think it's like an old little grandpa that you just are like, oh, he's so cute, protect him.
And then I mean, he's made this deal with the devil, right? One of the unmade, right? One of these spren that is, twisted and sort of inhabits the material plane of Roshar. And he's sacrificed his intelligence on most days, and then he's supremely intelligent in small glimpses, and I just love the whole almost like what's that thing from Always Sunny in Philadelphia where he's got like the chart up with all like the different dots on it, strings, the conspiracy, and I loved it, and like the fact that people create this cult around it. And then also a lot of it is wrong. And because of the things that change, it may have once been right, but the future has been changed, right, by the actions of different individuals. So, yeah, I'm super interested. Now he's taken on Odium as a form. I mean, he is going to be a huge baddie. And I mean, Danalar's going to have to face him, right, at some point.
Well, will he?
Yeah. What do you... Well, what you infer it, Red Panda. What do you kind of mean by that?
But just before, I also have to give a special shout out to Rock, who is also one of my favourite characters, but doesn't feel like can be a favourite character, particularly for his stew that he always cooks for Bridge 4, because that's incredible. But I mean, I guess one of the questions that I was left with at the end, we've got there's going to be this battle, there's going to be champions. We don't necessarily know who the champions are going to be. And also, the deal was made before he ascended, or before he became the embodiment of, or the vessel of, Odium. So is it still going to go ahead? Is there a way that he can get out of it?
Yeah,
I would be upset if there's no battle, but...
it's going to be something that we're not expecting, I think, is basically all I can guarantee on that one, because it's all kept, I think deliberately vague to a level where it's like there's going to be some sort of big showdown between the motive forces behind this, but beyond that, like that's the author's guarantee. There is going to be some kind of culmination. There's going to be climax at the end of this fifth book. What form that takes, how it works, that's going to obviously vary massively. And I think with Tarabanji taking over, he's obviously a lot smarter than the previous guy.
Rays, right, wasn't it? Yeah. We didn't get to know Rays very, very much, did we? Realistically,
he just seemed like an angry man, didn't he?
A bit of a knob, really.
Just a baddie.
Yeah.
So I'm sure he'll find loopholes, and that will be a big part of this. And there's all sorts of theories around this on Reddit and stuff. If you wanted to go down that rabbit hole over the last couple of years,
we'll go to some speculative stuff in a second. I'll just give you guys mine, and she's kind of fallen out of favor a little bit. Is it Shalon or is it with an A or with an O? Shalon Devar?
Shallan.
I can never remember. I remember when I read the books trying to think, I really need to carefully think about how I'm pronouncing this name, because there's going to be a lot of their names being pronounced.
I'm committing to Shallan. It may be wrong, but you say it with confidence.
Said it with confidence, yeah.
Exactly.
Wait a minute. We'll get it right.
Well, I mean, we haven't made this amount of effort to get anyone else's name right so far, so...
It is, I think it's Shallan. Shallan.
There you go. So, I mean, she really interested me because I loved Brandon Sanderson's writing about revealing her character slowly, and her looks back into her incredibly traumatic past where she killed her own family, to save her other family, but basically she's completely suppressed all of that, and she has and it's broken her inside. And Patton is like my favorite spren as well. And Patton, even though they're a cryptic spren and they're like the least trusted of all the spren, is actually kind of her grounding force and tries to keep her under control. And I think that she loses it a little bit when she creates Veil, right? These personalities, and she tries to project an image of like what she wants to be to suit the situation and what she thinks she needs. And it's based in like massive insecurity and also desperation. I think she's like the most desperate character a lot of the time. She's a bit of a desperado. And I really enjoyed that. I mean, I started to like her a lot less in the previous books because of the way she treats Adolin, who's obviously her love interest. And he's a very good man, right? You know, pretty one-dimensional kind of warrior, you know, very heroic though. But he's got values, right? And she sort of treats him like terribly. I have absolutely no idea why he stays there.
I'm not sure what it is with Shallan. Her character there's just something slightly annoying about it. It's she just like flops upwards, and it's kind of like, I think it's kind of an interesting way that she's presented and created, and the way that these different personalities manifest themselves. I think the backstory is really good, but sometimes I think it, even for a crazy fantasy series like this, it just kind of stretches the realms of believability when she just outsmarts these people who are supposed to be geniuses, you know, in their own home, while just pretending to be her idea of what a spy should be, that kind of thing.
Yeah, you're right. And I started sort of moving towards Nivani in Rhythm of War because, you know, in a way, she has some of those characteristics that Shallan has, but she's more mature. She's more considered, and when it comes to actually being like the double agent, you know, when she's trapped in the Urithiru Tower with the Unmade, I think that lives in that tower, and also the listeners who have taken over, she fully gains the confidence and seeks to understand these people in a different way, but never loses her loyalties at the same time. And she's so clever and considered about the way she does that. And it shows a lot more like courage. Whereas initially I thought that Shallan had a lot of courage from like going away from her brothers, from doing this like heist to try and like resurrect her family. And she wasn't doing necessarily the right things. But she then connected with Jasner. She took on this mentorship, and I was just like, she's got a bright future. But she does kind of fall a bit and become quite annoying in some ways. But one thing I am looking forward to in Wind and Truth is to whether or not now she's sort of overcome some of that split personality disorder piece, whether she actually becomes, you know, more of herself again and more of a heroic character once again, because she's definitely not heroic right now in any way.
I think that's fine. You know, not everyone needs to be heroic in that series, and I think, you know, some of the things that kind of she's guilty of it, the same as other characters, in terms of like Dalinar is suddenly an angel where he used to be a, you know, by all accounts, really sadistic evil man, basically, and Kaladin
horrible warlord.
Warlord, yeah. And then Kaladin is, you know, Mary suing all over the place, just currently is suddenly able to do all sorts of things. You know, it's definitely not a thing unique to her, but I just think the context that she gets put in kind of brings that out as being more and more unbelievable and kind of dissonant with everything. And the way that Aladin treats her as well, I think it's actually, for me, it's kind of the other way around to what you were saying, Orpheus. It's like the way that Aladin treats her is just so undeserved in some ways.
Exactly.
You know?
And I was like, this guy is simping for this girl who's just doing absolutely nothing for him, causing him huge problems, emotional stress, and he's basically by her side fighting all the way like a champion, and you're just like, what are you doing? You've been totally hoodwinked.
But then is that not actually a reflection on like it's a different way of presenting a love interest in a relationship that we don't see a lot of, and actually it's probably, I found it really frustrating because it's also maybe what you see a lot in real life with some people where you're being treated like crap.
Yeah.
What are you doing? But we don't see a lot of that,
It's true,
especially in fantasy books. I don't think it's.
I mean, a lot of fantasy, you know, well, busty women night, but also, you know, like men mistreating, you know, women quite a lot, clearly, you know, but the sort of emotional abuse, almost you could call it, that she puts him through, it really, really sort of, you know, was a bit of a turning point for me, particularly in Shadesmar, about her character. But yeah, one of the things that I'm hoping for is that there'll be some development, and maybe, you know, we'll see some sort of regain from her as we go.
Again, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that we not necessarily like all these characters. I'm still unsure whether we're supposed to like Shallan or not. That's one of the I've always found quite interesting.
Yeah.
Are we supposed to like her? I think initially you are, and then I feel like it's a bit deliberate that it kind of, you know, she sort of slides down in favor a little bit. And that's definitely nothing bad about the writing or anything like that. It's not a bad sign. It's just, it's not the arc that you might expect. It's not a clean, easy, oh, she's married a prince and it's all going to work out fine sort of thing. It is messy. It's kind of horrible.
Yeah.
It can be a little bit annoying to read sometimes, but that's, again, a sign, I think, that you're invested in it. And
yeah,
happen,
you know, Brandon Sanderson's one of those writers, I think, with his style. It's like, you know, if you just want something that's going to give you answers, you know, within a couple of chapters, and you're going to get that sort of dopamine hit of like, you know, oh, you know, plot twist, and I found out what this thing is. You know, it might take you 5 books to come to the point when you realize what Brandon has actually in his mind for these characters, right? And like what their true destiny is. And I love it because that sense of anticipation is just carried on through these books, and you can get through a, you know, a hand-sized tome, you know, width of it, you know, and still want to investigate. I think, guys,
that's the best thing with sorry, just on the and just to get back on the Sanderson hype train. The one thing he does really well is always deliver. He's like really consistent. I've got, you know, a lot of other fantasy series. You kind of sometimes there's a bit more magic to their worlds in the sense of like, you know, that these books there's just something, the X factor there. There's something like really amazing, like, you know, Patrick Rothfuss and George R. R. Martin, that kind of thing. You get these books, they're just brilliant, but they fizzle out because they're not actually structured. They haven't actually planned what's going to happen. They haven't got there's nothing they're trying to get towards.
Yeah, they've started writing and they haven't, you know, that they haven't planned the end. Yeah.
Exactly. Whereas Sanderson, I think, you know, he's got a point he's trying to make. He's got an arc he's writing. He's got a structure he's working to, which allows him to deliver consistently like awesome results. But he doesn't quite hit the very highs, which is I think a sacrifice that I'm willing to make for it, really.
Yeah, like you don't. It's not like a thriller, is it? You don't get that same, you know, oh gosh, you know, sort of like absolute sort of adrenaline that you do with some other writers. But I think
you're challenged.
Yeah,
I think that's the important thing. You're challenged. You're taken through an emotional journey. You're upset with people. You're angry with people. You're hooked because you're like, hold on a second, this isn't where I thought this was going. But it's not a easy win, joy hit. It's a challenge. And I think that's an incredible thing to be able to challenge people consistently through however many hundreds of hours worth of reading it is.
For sure, guys. Right, what we'll do is we're going to take a little, like, a couple of minutes break there, 2 minutes or so break. Are you guys happy to carry on chatting for a little while? You haven't got anything pressing? And, you know, we've got, next up, we've got theories and predictions on the plot for Wind and Truth, which should be fun. And then we're going to probably dive into some of, like, Roshar's greater mysteries, or the Cosmere's greater mysteries, before finishing up with like who's the most OP. So if you guys want to stay tuned, and we'll be back with you in a few minutes, guys.
Upstairs to put it off, but it's just green. I don't know why, and like he could just do his plain white background that everybody sees in his PSCs. Hello, we're talking about you.
Hello.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why I put on my green screen, but really, it just went that way.
You just want to insert yourself with some fan art, don't you?
Yeah, it's true. I need to get some of that behind me. But also, I'm still. It has a nature vibe. Well, thanks, Hex. Like, cultivation is within me right now. The not in a weird way. Okay, right. We're gonna go into a little bit of chatting about theories and predictions. And I'm kind of gonna leave this open to the floor for like who wants to jump in, and Hex, on the chat, if you've got any predictions for Wind and Truth, chuck them in. But basically, it could be one of the main plots. There are a couple of main plots, but it could also be your favorite subplots because there are a few of those going on. So I don't know if anyone wants to jump in.
Okay, so I think a good one to start with is what caused the sort of the cycle to start again. Like, what's the event that has caused the raids to come back, has caused all of the invasion, all that kind of stuff.
So it's interesting because at the very beginning of the book, right, it takes us to a scene where the original, not the Knights Radiant, what are they called? Like the Guardians, so there's the Heralds, yeah, are fighting the Voidbringer armies. And that's when they give up, basically. They sort of betray the main Herald, and they all just bugger off, essentially. And
apart from one of them.
Yeah.
Town or Tull or...
Yeah, Tull. And he's left sort of in that constant struggle, isn't he? But it does seem like they were the ones who finished it. But then you get the reappearance of some of the heralds, right, later in the book. And I don't know whether they are triggers to that or whether or not, they're just, coming back because there's another void storm or whatever. A couple of them have been living on the material plane, right, in disguise since that time. And we get Zeth's relationship, our favorite assassin. In fact, not the world's favorite assassin right now, apparently, according to X. But the we won't go into healthcare CEO conspiracy theories right now. But the, oh dear, yeah, exactly. But this assassin sort of links up with Nail, right? Not Nail, yeah, I think it's Nail, and then he is reforming the law. Skybreakers, the law-based Knights Radiant Order, to his own ends, right? But I don't know. I don't know if that's a trigger to these events or it's just a consequence.
Yeah. So I think the idea is, right, that the Oath Pact is that when the Heralds die, they get sent to Braze, which is like the planet in the solar system that they're in, where they get tortured, and then they have to basically succumb to torture. They have to break in order to then sort of restart the cycle. And Town was being this entire time, all the Heralds have been on Roshar or in hiding in various places, and Town has been being tortured. And then we see Town come back to Roshar with books, so we assume it must be him who broke, and that's why he's now back, and it all makes sense. It's just finally he's given up. But there is an interesting, I'd say, theory. I think it's pretty much kind of like confirmed at the stage that is not the Herald that died and broke in Braze that actually triggered the recreants, or the whatever it's called. It's actually Shallan's mother, who was, theory goes, is was a Herald, who was then. And then Shalash, I think her name was, or something.
They weren't all male, were they? They were, they were mixed bunch, yeah. And so
that's one of the coolest theories.
So Shallan killing this Herald, killing her mother, right?
Yeah, sent her back to Braze, and then she broke under torture, not Town, and then they all get sent back once one of them breaks to then like retrain humanity and restart the Knights Radiant stuff. So I think Shallan's history is even more intertwined with the sort of the major events than has so far been like explicitly stated. But yeah, that's one of those cool theories which I think is going to turn out to be real, and I think it's almost confirmed at this stage, I think. But yeah, and kind of what the Heralds have been up to outside of that as well is quite interesting. So you got the main guy, Ishar, who's now like a mad prophet king, and you've got Nail, who's doing his own thing with the Skybreakers, and then you got various other ones popping up all over the place. So again, I'm sure they'll become plot relevant again at some stage.
Yeah, for sure. There are basically no answers around the Heralds right now. I don't like. What do you think, Red Panda?
I think that they introduce them in such an interesting way that some of them you sort of knew was something important, but some of them were presented just as mortals, and then they develop over the course of the whole thing. And I just have no idea where they're going and what is gonna, and I guess how that's all gonna, I'm assuming, come together to be what was, before a cohesive unit of people, but they seem it's so split and fractured at the moment. And you have will they ever come together and be able to all kind of...
Yeah, I mean, there's like massive friction there because, they've betrayed each other. They have, acted in ways that, probably unforgivable ways to each other. So whether or not that they can come together and like actually assist humanity or the Parshendi or both,
or it'll just be another conflict.
Yeah. I mean, coming back to Harry's point, the other theory that I have, it actually relates to the other elements of Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere and the Mistborn trilogy. The the end of it with the shards of what is it? Not cultivation, preservation and ruin being brought together into Zazid, right? And that shard being reunited has caused like a cascade of events to occur in other realms where there is shards. So, and I'm not sure whether or not I'm just reaching too far there, but you know, that whole thing about shards being maybe separate, you know, and then the collision of the shards or combining of the shards or things being brought together has accelerated the road towards whatever the destiny of the Cosmere worlds are going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the real macro has got to be the reuniting those shards over however time frame that is, right? That's the real overarching story. I thought you were going to go with Kelsier being one of the Ghost Bloods.
Well, so I mean, people say, right? You know, there's loads of threads out there that people say, oh, you know, Ghost Bloods, it's Kelsier. He's operating like, you know, basically like another gang, you know, like he did in the Mistborn novels, where he's going to try and overthrow whatever power is going on by sort of being a criminal, like almost running a criminal enterprise. And the Ghost Bloods, you know, we've got little information about them. We know that they're leveraging Shallan as an agent, right, for them. You know, in a pretty pulling on her heartstrings and leveraging her to work on their behalf. And she does it in Shadesmar, you know, which further sort of puts a blocker between her and Adolin. Yeah, I think it's pretty legitimate to say that, you know, an external catalyst, let's just say the theory is, rather than maybe a shard being pulled together, but an external catalyst from another area of Brandon Sanderson's world has been one of these things that has caused this. I'm just going to restart our music for us.
Yeah, I think in terms of uniting the shards and everything, that's what Odium, his core motivation is as well. That's what he wants to do. Part of the whole agreement is designed so that, like, if he loses, he's stuck on Roshar, and if he wins, he's not. So for narrative reasons, I'm interested to see what the actual outcome will end up being, because it's probably going to be more interesting to read 5 books about Dalinar reluctantly leading the armies of Odium to conquer other worlds than it is to have another 5-book series to set on Roshar with the same characters and factions and things.
Yeah. And, you know, all of Brandon Sanderson's novels have this idea of investiture, right? Which Surge Binding is a component, like an expression of. You know, in Warbreaker and other things, you know, animating objects is the expression of it, but it's about taking the spirit or the magical energies of the Cosmere and channeling them in different ways, and those powers coming from these shards or being derived from these shards. So at some point, you know, I do expect to see, you know, not only these guys going over from Roshar into Shadesmar, but, you know, people going over onto what's the world for Mistborn? It's something beginning with S. Scariel or Scadrial. And other places like that, and then, you know, if Dalinar is the is he the what's his Knight Radiant order as well as the Bondsmith, and there can only be one Bondsmith, right? That's
there are 3, I think.
Oh, there are 3. Okay.
Navani's one with the sibling. Dalinar's one with the Stormfather. And then there's another one, so I'm not sure what it is, but there are 3.
Yeah.
Limited number of.
Yeah.
But they must be the driving factor to be able to bring these shards together in some way or affect that world. But yeah, okay.
I guess unite them if you take that to a
real
core level. Maybe that is the actual drive, you know.
I mean, that was terrifying when Dalinar got those visions. Like, some of them were legitimately horror stories, right, in the books. You know, some of them were terrifying. You know, the whole sort of and the Stormfather being like, unite them at the end of them, and hearing these voices. It was super psychological thriller. I absolutely loved it.
Also, the Stormfather being your, like, spren, the one that you've bonded with, is pretty terrifying compared to like Pattern, this cute little thing that like dots around. I'd be like, why have I got this one that's just shouting at me and giving me visions? I want a different one.
You, with the amount of stuff that you read and write, the fact that you could have like a spren made out of ink that essentially travels over documents and things like that, it would be cool. The other theories. So, you know, I'll just go for a stab here. One thing that I'm really looking forward to see explored is Adolin's relationship with the Deadeye blades and armor, right? And I know this is kind of a subplot. It's not really the main plot, but actually it really engaged me because obviously at the Recreants, right, these spren have essentially been lobotomized, right? You know, they go back to Shadesmar and they just become these, you know, again, it's like that horror element, like the sort of scratch off face, almost like a child's picture of a spren that has been, you know, a scribble instead of like their actual form as a spren. And I found that really engaged me. And Adolin's, you know, honor and his compassion and his belief, right? His belief and his constant talking to his sword, basically, has started to, you know, generate these impulses from this being. You know, he's not interacting with it in the way that Kaladin interacts with Syl as his true shard blade, his living shard blade. But I don't know what you guys thought about that subplot. I just think it's awesome.
I really loved the development of that, and I think that's what made me go from being like, oh, just like a prince sort of charming character that's a bit one-dimensional into something much more interesting. And it's the Deadeye spren. It's Maya something, I think is his spren's name, and their relationship is just so sweet. And the fact that they can't communicate in the same way, I think it's incredible. And I think it will be more important, the Deadeye's element of things, like those spren, I think will be more important to the story, particularly like in the Shadesmar element, than we necessarily think, because they, by my understanding, a Deadeye, so like the spren would be there if the knight broke their oath, and then they'd go back to Shadesmar, but then they'd be able to come back, and rebond, but they can't now.
They can't rebond, yeah.
And there's obviously something in that, and whether that's related to the twisted spren that's captured that has made everything go slightly differently, and I hope that is explored more, and there's some development in whether in the Deadeye's Shadesmere, but also what's happening with these corrupted spren, the twisted spren, and what does that mean for what then happens if there's a change in that, and what does that mean for Roshar, I guess, more widely, because it obviously had enough of an effect that it's changing the way that the spren were bonding, which is huge. So what does that mean then?
Yeah, I think it's going to have some sort of big plot relevance, especially because all of those spren were like, you know, they were the original knight's closest allies, right? They were the spren that liked the Radiants in the first place. So I'm sure they'll come back and have a voice at some point later in the story.
Yeah.
It's been really good for Adolin's character development, like you say, because he was a bit one-dimensional before that. He's still a little bit one-dimensional, to be fair. But at least, you know, it gives him something. Because I always think with him, like, where's this character going to go? He's already peak, you know, good-looking warrior man with a flashing sense and all this kind of stuff. Like you've already done it. You're already at the high point. Like there's nothing else, nowhere else for your character to go. So having a little sort of leading role in integrating these sort of rehabilitating these sort of Deadeye spare and stuff, I think will be a big part of what he does next.
And he used to be the dog's bollocks, right? He used to be the high prince's son. He used to be the best warrior that Alakar had, and now he's kind of playing this subordinate, supportive role, and it's just having this sort of basically little moment with this creature that he's almost nursing back to health from where it was. Just shows his compassion.
Yeah, and he's got that spren as well.
Pardon?
And he's got that spren as well.
Yeah, but he could bind, right? He could probably bind with a spren. But the fact that he's pursuing this is really cool. And one thing I think that is going to be important for the story, and why I think that my sort of projection for Wind and Truth or piece of theory is that these spren, these Deadeyes, they're going to know so much about the Knights Radiant, right? You know, Syl knows a little bit, but her memory has essentially faded because she like went off to be like a pixie, basically, and almost like in a Feywild sense, and she's just a scatterbrain. But these spren will know the ins and outs of the Knights Radiant and what they're about and their flaws and also their advantages, which isn't really well known, right, to the Knights Radiant. And they're in a bad position right now. Odium is, you know, not necessarily winning, but potentially has the upper hand in lots of ways. They need as much like knowledge and martial power that they can get, right, to defeat Odium and to bring him to some sort of conclusion with Dalnar.
And I guess they also know the reason that they all jacked it in the end. You know, what the fundamental reason for that was, which we haven't seen yet. So, yeah, I mean, I think this is too much kind of like potential and knowledge there to leave unexplored, right? And I'm sure he will, because Shadesmar as well, that's one of the key plot points there. Not that I really love the bits in Shadesmar. I always find them a little bit tougher. But
I loved Shadesmar.
Yeah,
I enjoyed the trial. I don't like all of Shadesmar, but I enjoyed like the trial bit where Adolin's put on trial, and the honor spren, their like hypocrisy is displayed. But yeah, I agree with you. They're a bit slower than the others. Like it's a bit like, oh, people moving from place to place occasionally. But I enjoyed that part of it. You know, Red Panda, do you have any sort of theories or plot points that you really want to see explored?
I think it maybe less of a theory, but we mentioned our favourite assassin / not favourite assassin earlier, Zeth. I loved him throughout because the idea that somebody has a rock, so therefore you do what they say. Great. Seems like a great way of dealing with things. But I think he's been something that is kind of slow burnt throughout all of them and is really now reaching his potential for uncovering more about the truthless. Is he truthless? Is he not truthless? Has he been doing these things because he was told that he was a truthless, so therefore he had to?
Yeah.
And has that all been a lie? And I think what happens in Shinovar, where he's gone off to purge or cleanse or whatever's going to go on there, will be really, really interesting. And then what happens next with him? So I want more Zeth, generally.
I mean, he's the ultimate fundamentalist, right? I don't know if you agree, Chugs.
He's the ultimate lax, you know, context of stuff. You know,
yeah.
I guess fundamentalist is a good way of putting it. Yeah, extremist.
He's driven by doctrine, right? He's completely driven by rules and ideas and that are spoken to him and that he's never considered. I do think his character is going to either be incredibly evil and break things, or almost like a Gollum sort of thing. His pursuit and dedication to his cause is going to be a catalyst to drive things towards good, even if he doesn't understand what good is. You know, for Gollum, that's obviously the ring and his own, like, you know, questioning about what it is. But and for Zeth, it's his, you know, pursuance of, you know, doctrine and what does it mean to him.
I think it's going to be less of a cool, like, he goes and kills everyone in Shinovar, and more of a journey of him being introspective and learning things and putting stuff into context and becoming a more well-rounded person. I suspect that's where it's going with him. And then Ishar as well as the kind of the main driver there to kind of like enable another big player in the game who at the minute is kind of limited by his own like narcissism, basically, and then trying to like get them out of that stupor, because he's the guy who originally made the Oath Pact and actually knows what's going on. So I feel as well he's going to be relevant to get to that contest or sort of element.
We're running short on time, so what I wanted to do is, right, give me a little, a little 30 seconds or a minute on where you think Wind and Truth is going to end up.
My dit to that is, it is anyone's guess, and any predictions that you have will be challenged or wrong in some way, because Brandon Sanderson is a genius.
That is a fair assessment. What do you think, Chugs?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an accurate assessment. For the sake of just putting something out there, I think the rules of the contest are going to get restructured in such a way that it's an apparent victory for Dalinar, but that Odium has actually won. And then the next part of the book series will be a broader conflict around Odium and all the other shards versus just being contained on Roshar. I think something like that would be the direction of travel.
Yeah, I think that the thing is, I think that Brandon Sanderson loves balance, and I think that in Wind and Truth, they're essentially going to push back and put Odium and their forces into a desperate situation, and that is going to reveal the fact that Odium, despite his nature or their nature, is more focused on, right, I want to win or succeed or create things so we can go to other worlds and then bring these shards together to create something greater. That's my sort of skinny on it. But yeah, unless less sort of speculative terms, I just bring it back to Roshar. Final couple of bits here. Roshar's creatures, Roshar's environment. What's your favorite thing about Roshar? Like, the thing that you love that makes it so unique, and also the thing that might make your skin crawl, or something that, is kind of disturbing about it. Yeah, go for it, guys.
I think it's quite a big question. I loved all of the little descriptions that Sanderson gives of like the environment. So like I have really distinctive memories of like the little crustacean, like crabby things that were going around, and like the axe hounds, and all of the like plants and life and things like that. So it's like, I think that, but the general background of the way that he describes the world and the everything that he adds on to that isn't integral to the story, but just makes up this really vivid picture of the place.
Like
so,
Alethkar is like and the Shadow Plains are like a rock pool without the water, aren't they? That, like, it's so cool. What do you think, Chugs? What's your favorite bit?
I think the alien nature of it, because I guess it is not an environment that humans did evolve in, right? And I think that kind of comes across in its design and how it's expressed and everything. You've got the one human bit, which is like Shinovar, which was given to the humans at some point, is all human plants and things, which presumably they brought with them. The rest of the world hasn't been conquered by that because of the nature of like how dangerous and the high storms and all that kind of stuff are. I think that's a really cool way of constructing the world. Like using the crustaceans as kind of animals that can survive in that environment as your kind of like dominant life form, that kind of thing.
The amount of thought that he's put into that, like the creatures have got to be able to live in the the meteorological environment that he's created. It just, Sanderson's ability to construct a system in his mind that's realistic, even in a fantasy setting, is crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah, I'm sure there are all sorts of problems with it in reality, but it definitely passed the smell test, doesn't it? Like, it seems legit as you kind of go through it. And also the fact that all birds are called chickens. I really enjoy that.
Yeah, chickens. Because they only, we're hovering over Shinovar right now, but that's like the last environment that's remaining because it's on the end of their the storms that is really like a temperate sort of, you know, Earth-like environment. The rest of it is blasted by the storms, particularly Alethkar, and it's bred these sort of warriors. You know, my favorite thing is, you know, still from the first book, and one of the reasons that I loved it, they're chasm fiends. You know, the hunts for those that he describes are just really cool, and this exceptional monster that's got something amazing inside. It's completely blown away all the political purpose of the war, and now it's all about getting these gem hearts from these huge chasm fiends. It's just like so cool. When they came out, it was almost like the Dune worms or something like that of the epic scale, and like the fear they experience when Kaladin and Shallan are like trapped in the chasms and they're being chased by these creatures is super cool. Is there anything that you're like that really makes your skin crawl though, that you really don't like, you know, that's like too weird, or, you know, or just something that you really enjoy because it's terrifying?
I think, well, I as actual me hates chickens, so I really love that they're the only like humanish thing that is in that world, because that to me reinforces the fact that they're creepy little dinosaur things that shouldn't exist. So that can be my answer to that one.
Yeah, not sure. I guess the dead eyes and stuff like that are slightly unsettling in terms of how they work and kind of what they are and how they're related to other spren and all that kind of stuff. I find that quite interesting. I'm sure there is a better answer than we've seen so far as well. I don't know exactly what's happened there, but that kind of, it's like a mystery that's got these kind of like questionable attributes around it, which are a little bit like
yeah, a bit weird. You know, the sprint, like I loved the anticipation sprint before the battles. Right, so you know when the battle lines are forming up and they just have like these streamers almost that come out of the ground in front of them, and the sort of fear and adrenaline and the glory spin that pops around them when they're you know, they've done something amazing on the battlefield. It just you know, it brings out those emotions in such a visceral and visual way. It's brilliant. It's
a beautiful way to make those emotions feel slightly more tangible. I think I love that he's done that, not just with the spren are important for bonding, it's actually they exist elsewhere.
Yeah, and it's normal when spren appear, like and it's almost like it's like in Northern Lights, you know, when you have your demon responds to your emotion, you can't quite conceal your emotions. Like they have to interact in a social environment in a different way because they can't really conceal it.
They do a book series when they have magic parrots, which basically is like exactly like that. In fact, we have seen some of those turn up. That's what the chickens in I was going to say a Song of Ice and Fire. That's not right.
Ravens.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what they are in the series, and they've got the breaths as well, all these different magic systems, and in none of those worlds did spren exist. So again, there's going to be some explanation, presumably, for why spren are here but not elsewhere. You know.
So, final question, guys. Who is the most OP like character or like Surge Binder or something like that? Like there's, you know, got ridiculous powers that you think is the one that you'd be like, right, if I was gonna like min max this and just become like the supreme, who would you go for?
I think it's Dalinar. It's old man Dalinar. He's got his shit together to an unbelievable degree from absolutely nowhere. And is now like, he patronizes everybody around him constantly, just calling everybody son. He's got this seemingly like infallible moral code and everything that just seems to inspire everyone around him. He's just totally like unstoppable force. He gives those real vibes with him. And you just feel like even if it did come down to like Mortal Kombat or something like that, still he would still just beat everybody. But he chooses not to do that because he's such a boss.
Yeah, he's like, okay, I'm too alpha. I'm just going to be like, I'm not even going to try and hit you because, you know I'd win.
I'll let my son do it or whatever, you know.
What do you think, Red Panda?
I would go for Seth because he just seems to be able to
Be a ninja.
be a complete ninja, and probably because we haven't really explored a lot of his backstory. It's not really an explanation for it. He just appears and he's a ninja, and we think he's like in his 30s, but is just a complete world-class assassin, and then we don't really know why.
And I guess he's the only one that's really kind of outsmarted or outfought Dalinar in some way, because, you know...
And Kaladin, arguably.
Yeah, and like, you know, he's the one that, you know, Dalinar wanted to protect his brother. He wanted to protect the previous king. He couldn't do that. That guilt remains with him, you know. So in a way, he's the only one that sort of challenges them in a martial sense. So yeah, totally.
Yeah, and he's been a real catalyst for the whole series as well, right? Like his impact has been totally outsized compared to a lot of the other characters, especially how much of him we've seen, which isn't a lot.
I personally think Yasna or Navani, the soul casting thing, right?
Yeah, that'd be good, wouldn't it?
Like, also, I know that Brandon Sanderson just loves his tech as well. He loves his, like, creations and inventions and building. The ability to, like, create something out of nothing, or, like, create amazing technology and the Fabrials. Like, I think that with tech supremacy, they're going to kind of win the conflict, and there's already like indications of that in Rhythm of War, right?
Yeah, I think that might be the sort of the edge that they've got. And I think, in fact, in this kind of conversation, I think the character that's underpowered to the biggest extreme is Odium, and has been Odium throughout the whole thing. He's all talk.
All talk. Yeah.
There are kind of elements of him bringing stuff in and kind of, you know, he's created like a rival storm, or whatever. But considering he's supposed to be.
He's a manipulator, right? He gets other people to do his work for him, or them, you know. But yeah, I totally agree with you. Right, anyway, guys, any final comments before we wrap up?
Ishar would be the most OP, I think, because he managed to like take out all three of the main characters without trying. But I don't think that really counts, because that's just like, you know, the boss cinematic. You're in a cutscene. You don't have any control over your character. Yeah, trying to prove to you they are dangerous. You know,
it's like a D&D when the dungeon master puts a creature that you can't defeat, specifically to like make you guys learn that you're not gods.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining tonight. It's been a great discussion. What I think we should do, if you guys are up for it, is like, you know, Sanderson loves to split his books down into like parts. So, you know, when we've all read part 1 or something like that, let's all gather together again and like discuss a bit of part 1, you know, see what we're feeling, you know, probably like later on this year or early next or whatever, and just have another chat. But I think this was really cool. So thanks for joining.
That's great.
Nice to be here.
All right, guys. Okay, have a good night. I've been Orpheus. This has been Arcadia. Thank you to my friends, Red Panda and Chugs, for joining tonight. And we will see you very soon. Please remember to follow the stream, or if you're watching this on YouTube, to like and subscribe. And the VOD I'll release directly after this. And then in a couple of days, what I'll try and do is get some highlights out for everyone. So yeah, au revoir, Hex. Thank you so much for being in the chat. We'll see you guys later.
Bye.